So I'm thinking some theatrics, some pyrotechnics. Do you know any stand-up comedy bits?
I'm not sure I can be helpful.
That's okay. Listen, good to have you on. It's nice to speak to you again. It's been almost 3 years, you realize.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah, 3 years.
Oh, you're all grown up.
I was a little
You were a
toddler.
baby.
I don't know if you remember, I was still in my stroller when we had our first vetting call.
I think you were right out of school, right?
I was in school.
Oh, you were still in school. Okay, I give you more credit. All
I
right.
was in school, but I was in undergraduate school and not high school. Okay.
Okay. Well, no, I knew that. I knew you weren't in high school. That would have been a real long shot, wouldn't it?
Let's chat about what this is all about, and it's really good to have you on the show, Debbie. This is what we're calling our quarterly live broadcast that we're calling the Wash Up. And that's basically where we cover what's bubbling up at EcoSoap Bank, but more importantly, spotlighting and highlighting the people behind EcoSoap Bank who take it to new heights, such as yourself at the Grant Me the Wisdom Foundation, but also people inside EcoSoap Bank working for EcoSoap Bank, particularly the women who comprise its fabric that take it to new heights every single day. So it's really an honor to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Okay, so you are the president and co-founder of the Grant Me the Wisdom Foundation. What does that mean to you, and how did it all start?
Well, I basically had spent since college, when I was a rape crisis counselor, focused on women and girls. And so for all the way from taking calls and going to the hospital in the middle of the night to, signing all kinds of petitions. I was a Girl Scout leader for 12 years. I mean, I did a lot of orphanage work. You just kind of slowly, a lot of people have a business plan for their lives, but a lot of us who have done different things, it just kind of evolves over time. And so I don't have a clear path to how the foundation started. It was just more of a weavy. I was speaking to a group of second career folks 2 weeks ago, I think. And they were very high performing folks. And a woman with an MBA she had an MBA from Harvard, and I think her undergraduate degree was from Yale. Her last child was going to college, and she said, "What do I do with my life?" And that's a big question. And I kind of asked that question all along. My family came first, but then what do I do with my life when I'm not taking care of my family? I'm basically a very selfish person at heart. If it doesn't make me feel good, I'm probably not going to do it. So what made me feel good was doing women and girls. And so I asked this woman, I said, "What do you read for fun?" And she was kind of dumbfounded because she had only been focused on her family all these years. And so I don't know what her eventual answer was, because women, we tend to focus on family and not on ourselves. But my focus, just the more I got involved, and part of that is living in Texas, because there is some backward thinking depending on the part of Texas that you live in with regards to women. But the more I got involved in my kids' lives, in my neighborhood, in the world in general, the more I began to believe that the only way to make the world better would be to focus on women and girls. And so it just over time steamrolled into my last child went to school, and she started her undergraduate degree a week after I started my graduate degree. We graduated a week apart, and she was at school in Massachusetts. I was at school in Connecticut. And literally, I went back home after graduation and I said, "Okay, I've got this Master's of Divinity," which is what most people get when they want to be pastors. And I was the child of a Baptist minister. And I knew I didn't want to be a pastor. So I just went, okay, what have I been doing with the last, I
Yet
was
you
almost 50. So
yet you continued with the master's degree.
yeah, no, I got the master's degree. This was after I graduated. I graduated in '09 at 49 years of age. And I went, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a full-time pastor? Am I going to go back to doing a nonprofit work? What am I going to do? And so I just decided that the nonprofit was the way to go, and that I could have a bigger impact than being a pastor. And so my husband and I started the foundation, and it's common to start a foundation, the Debbie McLeod and Jay Sears Foundation. I'm not, as you've already said earlier when we spoke, I'm not big on press. And so I just started doing some research on what, who did I admire, what kind of phrases or I don't even know what I want to say, concepts were really important to me. And this Reinhold Niebuhr poem that is used a lot by people in recovery, Grant Me the Wisdom, is the direction I went. But it really was just a matter of soul searching and not wanting my name out there, but that didn't work for long because you're interviewing me.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Now, this, if you would consider this your 40 minutes of fame,
There you go.
please, and just a little housekeeping. So
Sure.
you and I will talk for 40 minutes, and the other people who will join the Zoom call, in the last 20 minutes of the hour, we'll have a Q&A where they can ask you questions and also
Sure.
ask us questions about EcoSoap. But this is so abundantly refreshing because there are so many variables at play which created your particular philosophy on women and girls. And I also want to talk about how you began to focus on the developing world as well. I thought you were just going to quote me a statistic that you found from UNICEF, and then had that as the founding doctrine for your foundation and its mission. But this is far more nuanced and all the more interesting. Please continue.
No, yeah, I would love a statistic. Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wudun wrote Half the Sky. Anybody who does developing world work knows about that. I started doing orphanage work. My kids were still at home. It was 1999 with an organization called Buckner Orphan Care International out of Dallas, but I'm in Houston. And it just slowly over time, after you've gone to, I don't even know, Kenya, Rwanda.
But how did you start, and why didn't you stay in Houston? What
Oh, I'm
pulled you
still in
away?
Houston.
No, I mean to travel initially. Why even leave the country?
Oh, well, that is a super good question. Um, why not? I mean,
Because
why,
it's there. Because
why
it's
not?
there.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
we belong to a global citizenship, right? We're all the same.
well, and that was before we had as much an understanding. I mean, that was 1999. People had computers. Wi-Fi was not great. I mean, it was the horse and buggy of social media and even computer. I mean, that was, you didn't have video calls. I can't even, I'd have to go back and like look at what was life like in 1999 because I'm so dependent on social media. Part of the going to developing countries, I developed a kind of a phrase of home is where my laptop is, because everything for me is on the cloud. I know. Everything for me is on the cloud. I can find anything at any time, any medical report on myself. I have it all the way back to the late 1990s. I mean, Dropbox is my best friend. I think, I think just why not? I mean, I can't even remember what country I went to. Romania. Oh, I know what it was. It was when the crisis was happening in Romania,
Right.
with all the kids in the orphanage. I took my then 12-year-old and 15-year-old to Romania. My husband was afraid to go because he thought it was too dangerous. So I took my two children. at which you can argue about the logic in that, but I gave them the choice. I said, you can go with me or not go with me. It's dangerous. The HIV crisis was raging right then, and these kids were just dying in orphanages. And I think that was probably the beginning, and that was through church. That was through Buckner Orphan Care International, and that was just, I just went on another trip, and then I go on another trip, and then before you know it, I'm China, I'm all over the place, and you also begin to realize the bang for the buck. I mean, it doesn't take
Yes, this is what I want to talk about.
Yeah,
too.
The bang for the buck, there's just no comparing what I can do for $1 in Houston or in the United States and what I can do in Cambodia or any country in Africa.
So, in the interest of full disclosure, I must tell our audience that we have been a long time grant recipient from Debbie's foundation. And through her direct support, we have been able to reach over 830,000 people with soap and education, just to demonstrate the impact per dollar. And secondly, she has been so generous and so consistent that she has provided consistent employment to 13 women in Cambodia to recycle soap full-time, but also receive things like health benefits and in-house education, things such as PC skills, literacy, numeracy, that sort of thing. But I must tell a funny story, if I may, about Debbie and my first interaction. And this is what I want to talk about too, what it means to be a grant maker and what you look for in international projects. So I don't know if you remember, probably not since it's so commonplace in your work. Our first vetting call lasted no less than 2 hours, I believe.
I'm not surprised.
And I had a partnership call right afterwards, I think maybe 15 or 20 minutes after our initial call, for you to determine if Eco Soap Bank was transparent, had various mechanisms in place, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember on that second call after you and I spoke, my colleague asked me if I was okay, that I looked a little, let's say strained. And I told my colleague in earnest that I felt that I had just received a shiatsu deep massage, and that every single nook and cranny of our organization was summarily exposed by Debbie. No, but listen, first of all, I want to thank you for this massage, even though I did not know that was what we were getting into, because I began to understand what grant makers begin to look for, what questions they begin to ask. And also, I've never had such an intense vetting call after that. Everything else has been a breeze.
I would love to say that was an unusual experience for you, but if you got together, which I will do everything I can to avoid that happening, with my other grantees, they would all go, oh yeah, that's normal. I just got a financial update. We just funded Thorn, which is trying to stop child sexual abuse on the dark web, and they for the first time this year, they were part of the Audacious project that TED has started.
Okay.
Well, they started several years ago, but it's just getting press now. And they just sent me out the first set of financials since our initial commitment last year to the Audacious project. And I don't think any of the other Audacious grantors sent back questions, but I sent back probably 7 questions. And so I got an email back, and I'm not speaking out of school, where some of the staff said, we'll get back to you when we figure out how to answer your questions. So I thought you would appreciate that from a multi-million-dollar, far-reaching nonprofit. I'm just as intense about it took us a long time to make this money, right. And I am super careful with my money.
Not only that, clearly you want to ensure that your funding and your grants are going to the intended and explained cause and purpose. But second to that, you clearly have such intrigue and genuine interest in the mechanics of all of our work as NGOs, as nonprofits. Is that still the case? And after this many years, what keeps you going? Is it interest? Is it passion? Is it a light at the end of the tunnel, if you will?
You know, nothing's going to be solved in my lifetime. I just turned 60 a couple of months ago, but I'm laying a groundwork, hopefully, for my family and for future generations. Also, what keeps me going is fear of failure.
Oh, okay.
We've had a couple of failures, like epic failures that we were funders of, and all I can think is, why didn't I ask this question? Why didn't I ask that question? A lot of the mindset with nonprofits is, if I give you the money, then it's your responsibility to spend it correctly. But I feel like, as the grantor, that I have an equal responsibility to make sure that the money is spent wisely. I wouldn't buy a house on a bad foundation. If I got the report back from the contractor and she said, "Hey, anything you do to this house is going to crack, it's going to fall apart, the wiring's bad, the plumbing's bad," then shame on me. Shame on me. Well, I don't have a contractor to hire. We're a tiny family foundation. So I am the contractor that flips the switches and turns the water on and flushes the commodes. And if I don't
that intimidates the grantees, of course.
It does. Well, you know what? It's a really good vetting process. If you have a grantee that is put back by it, put off, then you kind of go, okay, wait a minute. I had somebody call me from a national women's organization to fund women's projects just in general. It was kind of an umbrella organization. And I said, well, tell me the mistakes you've made that you've learned from. And it was a very young woman, not to pick on young women because she was doing the work. But her response was, oh, we vet our organizations really well. We haven't had any failures. Well, I mean, as a grantor, just all the flags, the bells, the whistles go off, because either she's not plugged in high enough up to know what the failures are, or she's not using critical thinking skills to assess her work and know what worked and what didn't. So it's a combination of, I think foundations have a little bit of a savior complex. We think we can save the world. We know we can't, but we think we can save the world. And fear that we're going to mess something up. It's probably a balance between the two.
This is one of the reasons why I enjoy working with you. Because I feel comfortable that we can express some vulnerabilities and genuine challenges that we're facing. I do not feel, and please correct me if this is wrong, that I need to put forward a pretense about our impact, about our work, and our model. Challenges are systemic and just endemic to nonprofit work in general. And for goodness sakes, we work in the developing world where culture is so complicated, and it's one of the most complicated factors to navigate between. So I feel very comfortable, and I also feel it's quite productive to share the challenges that we face on an ongoing basis with you, because I know you will return with 7 clarifying questions, which will begin to help us think about solutions for the long term. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Well, and I can't connect you with one of my other grantors who I think have faced the same issue you have if I don't know what the issue is.
Right.
And if the other grantors aren't, straightforward and coming. One of the things we're trying to look at in Nepal is creating a tuk-tuk business for women.
Okay.
Well, if I happened to see in India where there are pink tuk-tuks now in, I believe it was New Delhi. Well, if I didn't know that they were talking about in Nepal about all the problems they're having setting this business up, I wouldn't have been able to send them the report I saw. So if I don't hear about the warts, then I'm not useful. I'm just a check writer.
That's interesting, because you're contributing more than just funding. It's connections that are necessary, especially because social entrepreneurship is so difficult. One of the things that one of the phrases that I like to use and has kept me going for a long, long time is ideas are easy, implementation is hard.
Oh, amen.
Anyone can come up with a good idea. And I'm not knocking Tesla down or Benjamin Franklin. I'm really not. It's the Edisonian approach that it was the 1,000th light bulb that actually materialized the idea. I see it firsthand. And one of the things we're so proud of at EcoSoapBank is we maintain a certain level of flexibility when it comes to the model. And I realize that might not be best practice or even is unconventional, but if we see opportunity to shift to better our three main convictions of the environment, of women's empowerment, and also children's health, we're going to do it. We're going to try it. And if it fails, hopefully we did not take two extraordinary risks. But yeah.
And if you're not comfortable with failure, you're really not much of an entrepreneur.
Right.
I mean, there's stupid failure, there's non-calculated failure, there's, oh, hope it works out. Maybe it won't. It's somebody else's money. Who cares? And there's failure that's calculated and that you can only do so much. And then one of the other reasons that I'm really focused on women and entrepreneurship is that they receive such few dollars. I believe now the latest I've seen is 3% of the VC dollars go to women, and I'm sure it's even less in the developing world. I mean, there's no way that it's going to be higher.
Right.
And women are socialized to, once they fail, to back off. And I've certainly dealt with that myself. Okay, I failed at that. And it's worse when you're younger. When you get to be older, you're just kind of like, that's your issue. Okay, I failed. At least I tried. There's a really popular, I think she's a sociologist is what she would call herself at University of Houston, called Brene Brown. And she said, I'm really not interested in the people that tear me down, who are sitting on the bleachers. I really only care about the comments and the insight from the people who are in the game.
Okay.
So it's easy to throw stones at people who fail, but if you're not out there every day trying to fight the good fight, create the great company, support people who can't make it on their own, then I'm really not interested. It really doesn't devastate me that you think I'm wasting my time or my money.
Okay. I have so many questions, so little time. Can you tell me at what types of moments this work just clicks for you? Do you still get easily thrilled, or are they goosebumps that arise? Now, for me, obviously, I'm obsessed with soap recycling, and yeah, I'm obsessed with soap. Yes, very much so. One of the reasons for this whole show is to highlight other people affiliated with this work, because our audience has heard my story time and time again, and I won't bore them any further. But for me, when I see a budding entrepreneur with a brilliant new idea, but not only that, but a roadmap to success, they have a little bit of wisdom when it comes to materializing that idea. I'm a kid in a candy shop, but I want to ask you, when do the stars align, and how do you still feel after this long? Unfair question.
I think, no, it's a good question. I think one of the things that's probably started happening in the last probably 5 or 6 years is that nonprofits throw around the idea of a desire for data. And so when I get good data back, and it's got to be good data, that's another problem with nonprofits is they tend to accept whatever data is given them, and it's not necessarily culturally based, or there's not really a realistic comparison between what's the nonprofit world data compared to the for-profit world data, especially with regards to entrepreneurship. But then there's also the intangibles that are really hard to measure, like, do you have more hope now than you did before? I consider that a data point.
Okay.
Because I don't think you can accomplish much without hope. So I get particularly inspired with good data. I get inspired with new ways of looking at an old problem. When we first started working with charter schools,
Okay.
we were all inspired because they kept saying they get 95%, 99% of their kids in college. Well, once we started digging behind those numbers, they got the kids in college. What they didn't do is get them graduated. And when you held the charter schools accountable for how many kids actually graduate from
Right.
college, how much debt do they have, what are their interest rates, how long is it going to take them to get out of debt, do they get jobs upon graduation from college? They couldn't answer that question at all,
Right.
because that didn't reflect always positively on them.
Right.
So I get inspired when I see the data. The nonprofit looks at the data and they go, okay, we need to pivot here.
Okay.
Maybe a 2-year degree in HVAC repair or plumbing is better, so that a kid can make money, then go to a 4-year college, or maybe they don't ever want to go to a 4-year college and they can do better with plumbing or electrical. They enjoy it more than they do taking a class on history and getting a degree in, I'm not going to name off a subject matter, that is completely, I mean, I have a French degree, so I can throw stones at French majors, that it was very hard to get a degree to get a job in French.
Sure.
But I think when the stars align, when the data and what is happening on the ground lines up, you're like, oh, now I know why I get up every morning.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that. Speaking of on the ground, can you pull a story from your travels that demonstrated why investing in women and girls is so important? Do you have a specific story or anecdote? Or maybe a favorite country and why?
I remember going into Russia, which is not a favorite country, but I remember going into Russia one time. We had done fundraising. It was called Shoes for Orphan Souls for Buckner. And we had delivered those big metal truck containers that go on trucks or that go on trains. We had delivered hundreds of thousands of shoes to the port
Wow.
I mean, you can't even imagine.
On trains.
Yes, from the
Beautiful.
U.S.
Beautiful. Okay.
And we had delivered them. They were at the port, and then all the volunteers were coming in to take those shoes and socks and put them on kids in orphanages. We had spent at our church in Houston, we had spent hours and hours and hours organizing them by size, so that when we got into country, they would be divided into boxes, and we had lists of the kids' names. We knew their shoe size. We knew whether they were boys or girls, and it would make the transition incredibly easy from the container to the orphanage. The Russian government decided that we needed to divide the shoes by type of shoes.
Okay.
So go in your head to hundreds of thousands of shoes that are in boxes, big brown cardboard boxes labeled with sizes, all being dumped in the middle of a room, then divided by the type of shoe. Then they wanted to price each shoe, because they wanted to know, and they couldn't price them based on the system we had created. So all these volunteers are here waiting to give these shoes out, and we can do nothing.
Okay.
So I learned a couple of things. I learned to improvise. We have to do something with these kids. They're expecting us, and we have nothing to give them. I learned that why didn't we do our research? And I wasn't in charge at the time, but why wasn't the research done to find out how the Russian government wanted these shoes to come in? Now, this was the first time we'd done it, so you could make that argument that it was a mess and it couldn't be helped. Number 3, why didn't we buy the shoes in country? why did we decide that physically bringing the shoes was the way to go?
Right.
I mean, there were so many things. When we went into China, because shoes are so cheap there, we did buy all the shoes in country.
Right.
Every time I would go someplace, something would happen, and I'd go, "Oh, why didn't I think of this?"
I feel so lucky to have, in this type of work, everything is timing. A lot is timing, and a little bit of luck goes a long way.
A lot of luck, yeah.
A lot of luck, yes. Let's not belittle that. I feel particularly fortunate to have come in at a certain time where international development was becoming more formalized and good theories were being put in place. And frankly, a lot of studies and monitoring and evaluation had already occurred. So I had come in with a wealth of knowledge about best practices. And of course, there's nothing like an education experiencing and failing firsthand. But there were some essential practices and principles that we knew from day one we needed to include, such as local employment,
yes.
local sourcing, not cultivating a dependence among beneficiaries.
Yes.
And frankly, if we had started this 20, 30 years ago, we may have had made the same mistakes as countless and dozens of other NGOs. And so, but the thing is, this field is still developing. We are still learning how to help people. And you know what? Helping is hard.
Well, and people tend to think that because they're helping, if they make a mistake, I meant well.
Right.
But cultural insensitivity, I see that so commonplace. It's so commonplace for people to go into other countries, other neighborhoods, even in the U.S., and just assume that we know best. And I have a really hard time being kind to people like that. I have to really work at that.
Of course, it's difficult for sure. Everything must be driven on a local level. And you know what? I think you are doing that in practice by being a grant-making foundation. You are basically investing in other people's ideas with some light feedback and advice and an ongoing relationship. That's effectively what you're doing, right? You're believing in those.
Trying. It is hard vetting people also from the U.S. when you're not on the ground. And I have an autoimmune disease, which means I have to be careful about the countries I go to,
Sure.
About eating, about traveling on airlines. And so I do a lot of video conferencing. And it's although it's pretty similar to being there, it is not the same. And so vetting and keeping up with folks that are in a different country, different time zone, it's an added layer of difficulty.
I was on a podcast yesterday about current environmental issues, and the moderator asked me point blank what I believe trust is. I want to ask you the same question. What constitutes trust in a partner, in an NGO, something like that?
Well, I mean, I think trust is developed over time, and trust is hard. Trust is hard in relationships, and all business, all nonprofit is based on relationships. You can't do anything without relationships. I always go in not trusting people as I expect them not to trust me, because blind trust is a clear path to destruction. I mean, it is, not only is it not fair to the grantee, it's not fair to the people they serve. It's not, you're not being aware of your own shortcomings. I mean, I shouldn't be trusted. Anytime somebody has money to give, there's always strings attached.
Sure.
And so you shouldn't trust me. You should, okay, is she just trying to make herself feel better writing this check? Or is this genuinely an area that she brings some value added to? I think if I can't stand up to that kind of scrutiny, then I can't expect you to stand up to it. I think trust is crucial. It doesn't mean nobody makes a mistake. I will make a mistake. I will mess up. But over time, if I show up and you show up and we're honest, then I think that's as good as it gets.
Honesty and vulnerability, and these are important qualities. One of the things we want to achieve is we want to begin to establish trust amongst EcoSoapBank and our audience. And to do that for a couple of thousand of people through digital means, we don't have the opportunity to sit down for coffee with each of them, is a difficult task, of course.
Yeah.
What do you say to budding nonprofits who want to build a community that actively cares about the work we are doing? What are things we can share with this community? What are some things this community should begin to expect from nonprofits that they belong to?
Give me some more. Like what should they be asking of you?
Yes, in order to keep us accountable, but also why is it fundamentally important for, and I'll be perfectly frank, for Americans to care about international issues in a place like Rwanda or Nepal or Cambodia? How can we bring the message home to them?
Oh, how do you make Americans care? Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, when I first started the foundation, I had a friend say to me, you know, we need to fix the problems in America before we focus on all these other countries. And at first you're kind of dumbfounded when you first hear that, because it's in the Christian world, I tend to circulate in is like, oh, where did you see that in the Bible? Like, I miss that Bible verse. Take care of yourself first, and then worry about everybody else second. And so at first it catches you off guard. I just don't see how people look at suffering and look away. But last night we're in LA right now, and I stayed in a hotel and I walked by probably 6 homeless people. How did I just walk by? Well, I run a foundation, so I can feel good about the foundation, so I don't have to feel bad about those homeless people. And if I give them money, then they're just going to spend it on drugs, and I'm not going to make a difference. You know, you start playing the whole tape in your head that justifies, and at least 5 people I walked by. I think the more global, like as we talked earlier, the harder it is to look the other way. I think this coronavirus, the people stuck on the ship, I think it's a Princess ship in, you don't even remember what port it is. We were supposed to be in Japan and Taiwan this last 3 weeks in February. Well,
not anymore.
I mean, they're canceling flights. I mean, if you think you can isolate yourself to the U.S., which there's a huge push right now with Trump to be isolation, and the Republicans to be, and sorry to go political, but there's a huge push by a lot of political folks on the right to be isolationists. And if you think that's a strategy, close the borders, build a wall, you're just in denial about, it's like climate change. Really, are we still having this conversation that there's climate change and that we're a more global world every day, not a less global world? Like, is that really a conversation? Is that really how I want to spend the remaining years of my life, having those conversations? It's like, to me, arguing the sky is blue. I'm just not interested. If you're not part of if you don't consider yourself a global citizen, then I think you want to be that way, and I'm not going to say anything that wakes you up.
You know, since a young age, I felt no fundamental difference between myself or anybody I've ever met anywhere. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what country you're from,
There you go.
or what you look like, or anything like that. I will tell you something that I believe demonstrates some optimism. Of course, these bushfires in Australia were horrific.
Oh, horrible.
Were horrific. Just the square acreage is just it's
and the animals and the people.
It's jaw-dropping, particularly the effect on natural habitats and animal life. However, the international response was magnificent. Of course, there are still critics out there about the timeliness of the response and the scale of the response, but I do feel that because we are so interconnected, we felt something, we felt something for Australia. And this is my main challenge, and this is my main mission. How can I bring the story home of Tirang in Cambodia and tell somebody at a coffee shop in Pittsburgh and tell them why she is important? And the fundamental truth is that the organization is not important. I am not important. She is important because with a strategic investment, she can create a ripple effect of impact that's generative and will last for the next 30 years, right? This is the message that I need to bring home. But also, and second to that, it's just an impact per dollar. Sometimes it's difficult to be honest about that. But Debbie, you have impacted over 800,000 people through our nonprofit, right? That clearly that must speak for something,
The number, when you say a number that large, yeah, that I probably don't think about it in those terms, and
Sure.
I probably should do a better job tracking. We have 4 scholarships in Afghanistan for midwives.
Wow.
And I think about, okay, that's 4 women, but I don't think of all the births that they'll facilitate, or I don't think about
Correct.
the families that will send their daughters because these women are delivering their babies. I don't think of the
generative,
the peripheral effect, and that's probably my bad for not seeing the ripple effect of some of the stuff. Plus, you're just like you in what you do. You're pedaling so fast. You're trying to. You're trying to project out how much money am I going to give away this year? What's the highest and best use? How do I follow it up? I always feel like I'm not doing a good job. I always feel like I need a better way. When you talked about vetting earlier, I need what I should have sent you before that conversation, because then it wouldn't have gone 2 hours, is I should have sent you a list of questions.
Best massage I've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, but you sent me a list of questions for this interview, and I just looked at it 15 minutes before the interview. Well, even if you had just looked at my list of questions 15 minutes before we got on the phone, it wouldn't have probably taken as long, and it would have allowed you to spend time doing something else. So I always feel like I can do better, and I'm always assessing and reassessing, and I love working with people who do the same thing. The unexamined life is not worth living. Well, the unexamined nonprofit foundation is not worth being a part of. And if you saw the Dropbox files I had for best practices of foundations, you would just go, she's not putting 10% of that into practice. So I think knowing my own limitations and always seeing what I can do better also makes me better. It makes the nonprofits better, but it makes me better. But back to your question, I also think that everybody is carrying a huge load that nobody sees.
Of course, the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, and part of the reasons Americans don't care as much about other people as I wish they did is because even though we're wealthier and better educated,
relatively speaking,
all this stuff than we even were 10 years ago. I mean, if you look at, and you can argue $3 trillion in debt. I mean, we don't need an economics lesson here, but generally every year we're better off with some exceptions. It's still the depression and the anxiety that we deal with makes it really hard to see past our own noses. So I think the healthier we get, the easier, the better the world gets, because I do think that in a lot of areas we are the trendsetters. We are the Me Too. We are the global warming. We are, and again, I can make arguments that Germany recognized global warming before we did and made more, but I do think people look to Americans, whether it's entertainment or nonprofit work, they look to us to be examples. And I think we just have to always ask ourselves, are we worthy of that gaze?
The unexamined life is not worth living.
Yep.
Debbie McLeod. Very good. We should get it on a coffee cup.
That's not me, though. Somebody else said that. I don't even know who said it.
You can take credit.
Somebody would call me out.
As they should. And listen, speaking of examination and accountability, I think we have some questions from people tuning in today.
Socrates. See, it was Socrates. I just Googled it. Yes, so I definitely can't take credit for Socrates.
Sure. I don't think he would make a peep.
No.
So Brittany asks, I would love to hear Samir and Debbie share a personal story about one of the most touching transformations they've seen in their work. I'm going to leave it up to you first. And if you don't have one, I can follow suit. That's fine. We put you through the ringer here today.
No, I think turnaround is fair play, right? You're getting me back. I understand. I had an assistant, and this isn't even a developing world story. I had an assistant who got pregnant in high school, and in her case, it ended up being short term anyway, a good thing, because she was able to get out from underneath her father's roof. Oh. And she got out of college in 4 years with a bioinformatics degree, which is a combination of biology and information technology, basically IT. Had another child in that 4 years, and went on to work for me for another 7 years, I think it was. But I know that I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have had a second child, lived in an abusive family, an abusive marriage, and then graduated on time from a 4-year college. Would never have happened. It would only have taken one of those things to take my feet out from underneath me. But to overcome all that is nothing short of, just the power of the human spirit.
Yeah, every time I travel to one of our hubs, that's our nomenclature for recycling centers abroad. We're working in 13 countries now, drastically different places like South Africa to Nepal to Lebanon to Cambodia. I always have one experience which reminds me, oh yeah, you have gone through another set of modern history, different to me. You have gone through genocide, you have gone through civil wars, you have gone through political revolutions, and here you are now in a space where you're not trying to profit, you're not trying to game the system and get ahead. You were here genuinely and selflessly to help your fellow countrymates. And across our hubs, I see examples of that time and time again. And one of my missions, at least for this year, is to begin to tell those stories. I can only do it in so many words, and I can only do it justice to a certain degree. but to actually get them on the phone, including yourselves, to tell those stories, I think it would be remarkable for people to hear.
Well, I think the technology we have, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I think the technology we have now, the school and the Women's Center we have in Nepal, they have done such a good job on Instagram, and this may go back to your initial question, but they've done such a good job on Instagram just doing maybe a minute to 3 minute long little videos of people that have been served by one of the projects that I've done. And they just put them up there. And when I first started funding them, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, the young woman I talked to, oh, you want an inspiring story, Maggie Doan at Blink Now.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, never been to college.
We provide.
Oh,
sorry. We
no, go ahead.
We provide them soap monthly.
I love what they do, and for her to have gone right out of college, to end up adopting 30 orphans in one of the most remote areas of Nepal, and to have built this whole infrastructure around a school and women's empowerment and entrepreneurship, what she has done, and she does such a good job with social media. We funded a safe house for high school girls that couldn't graduate from high school because their home life was so volatile and so dangerous. And so one of the things we did was fund this safe house for just 1 year because we moved on to funding other things. She had the young women stand outside of the safe house, completely anonymous because nobody needed to know where they were, and just say thank you. And they sang me a song. I think it was like for my birthday. It was literally maybe a minute long video. I mean, it was short. And the impact to a donor. I mean, how many letters do I get? And I have to have a letter for the IRS. It has to say how much I gave, that you're a 501c3 and blah, blah, blah. But the impact of that is, and they do such a good job on social media of putting up short quick videos that she can refer any future grantor. Go on my Instagram site. You can see all of the stuff we've done since we started. And for a grantor, it's wonderful.
My parents have been long supporters of organizations such as Plan International. And, so I grew up receiving the pamphlets and the collateral, basically the solicitation letters in the mail. And this was before the era of social media and YouTube, etc. And so I see these static photos of representative people that donors might be helping. And that takes you only so far in terms of associating and feeling something, even though it's still very compelling. But this day, it's just incredible how little things like that, particularly video, can really speak to people and activate something inside of them to a whole new level. And I hope that it is precisely this type of intimacy which kind of helps us form new philosophies around what it means to be part of this planet, which we all share, and to basically dissolve boundaries, over some time.
We're funding a new website in Houston called Heart Gallery, and it takes pictures of kids that are up for adoption that are currently in the foster care system. And it has worked in San Antonio and Austin to increase, and I'm going to give you bad percentages, but it's something like 80% increase in adoptions just from the picture, then the first name, and then I'm not even sure it gives any information about the kid. But I was just having the conversation with the young woman who's heading up this program about what if we included videos, really short videos, that the kids just say, this is what my life is like, and this is what I want my life to be like. 2-3 minutes. I have to believe, exactly your excellent question, I have to believe that if an adult with a pulse and a heartbeat sees a kid, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, say, I want a parent, I want a mom, I want a dad, I want to go do this, I want to do that. life has been hard. I have to believe that, again, back to your other question, that has to impact people who care at all about someone besides themselves.
Of course, of course. You have showered us with a lot of wisdom here today. I also want to share a very quick anecdote from our interactions. You did not know that our first interaction was so formidable a
I
couple of
didn't.
years back.
I
So
did not.
at the end of our 26-hour call, just kidding, 2 hour call, I began to believe that I had stumbled across quite a global patron here, if I may. And I asked you genuinely, what drives you? What in the world is motivating you, not only to do this? A lot of people give money, and we're abundantly thankful for that, but demonstrate such profound interest in our work and the details associated with it. And so I asked you, what is motivating you? And I don't know if you remember what you said.
I have no idea what I said. I'll be interested to hear what you say.
You said, I have a lot of guilt because I spent a lot of time in church.
Oh, yeah. I posted on Facebook the other day. My problem isn't with God. My problem is with Christians. I spent a lot of time focused on church, and and I really felt like sometime in my mid-40s that I needed to start focusing outside of church, and that was probably pretty transformative. You didn't know I was going to say this because it literally just happened last week, but I'm gonna start traveling an hour from home to the Lucille Plain prison in Dayton, Texas, where I'll be a prison chaplain one day a week.
Wow.
Because I felt like I was getting too removed, which you probably feel this way when you're not in country all the time, where I need to be on the ground. I need to be talking to people like I did for 30 years, one-on-one, to really be effective at my job in general. And that is such an area of neglect. Is women in prison. They get fewer education dollars, fewer programming dollars. I think they get about 20% of what the men do in the state of Texas. And so it's going to be an area that, along with foster care, those are going to be my two kind of Houston focuses when I'm not doing international work.
We support, I know your words speak true. We support a number of prisons and detention centers and juvenile centers in Cambodia and Southern Africa. And,
Wow.
you're going there to support them. We're also going to equivalent places to support them in terms of basic hygiene and access to basic forms of healthcare. The lack of resources in those centers are abysmal, and we try to do the best that we can, and we're expecting to grow our prison support program dramatically over the next couple of years. But listen,
when we get off this call, I want you to tell me who I should be funding in those countries that you think is doing really good work.
No, absolutely.
I should be using you as a resource.
No, absolutely.
I should be. That's you make a good point. I watch CNN Heroes, and I usually wait for several years after the organizations have hit their, all these people are paying attention to them, to see how they've adjusted to their newfound stardom and influx of money. But you're really doing the work in country, and I don't have to wait for them to get on CNN Heroes radar. So right. I should have been see, you learn something every time. Learn something every time.
Very good. And the last question from our audience is, when can we expect your autobiography to come out?
Oh, that's funny. I just got a new desk in my office, and the woman who got it for me said, "Oh, now all you have to do is write." So I think that whoever sent that question in must be talking to her. Donna, I'm going to have to tell Donna about this question because I was using an old dining room table, and now that I have this new desk, I have absolutely no reason not to be writing. So ball's in my court.
Well, we're looking forward to it, and also the book tour too, and
Yeah.
hopefully it is in cafeterias in various detention centers across Texas. That would be a lovely setting, I feel.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Listen, we are better for having spent an hour with you. Thank you for your time again. And just one more point to bring it home for people. So our last fundraiser was generously matched dollar for dollar by your foundation, Debbie, and we aptly met our goal. And so I want people
Yay.
to know that their dollars were amplified because of your generosity, but also thank you to everyone who donated to that fundraiser. We can't thank you enough.
I
Debbie,
love doing matching grants. I'm glad to do it again.
beautiful. Debbie, thank you again so much. Please continue your work. Do not slow down. Don't even take a rest day. The world needs you more than ever. Thank you again.
And you too.
Beautiful. Take care.
Thanks, Samir.
Bye, everyone. Thank you again.